From Britain with Love, written by Robert A. Webster, narrated by Nigel Gore. After breakfast, the four hungover old men went into the recreation room. Steve, Wayne, Elvin and Charles sat around the piano while several other residents milled around, knowing they were safe for now, as their nemeses were talking and had no instruments. Wayne opened his briefcase, took out pages of handwritten music and handed them to Charles, who smiled and looked through the pages. He read the music to one song, which he played while the others listened. Steve and Elvin looked impressed, as did Charles as he played the melancholy ballad Wayne had entitled Vulnerable. Charles finished playing and they looked at Wayne. "That sounded good, mate," said Steve, and looking at the sheet music asked, "Are there any vocals?" "Sure," said Wayne, and handed him a separate sheet of paper with lyrics scribbled on it. "Play it again, Nobby," said Steve, looking at the words. Charles played through the song again, and when Steve picked up the tune, he sang. Halfway through, Charles stopped playing, much to the relief of Elvin and Wayne. Steve was out of key, sung in the wrong tempo, and his gruff voice made the ballad sound like grating sandpaper. "Sorry, lads," said Steve. "Too slow for me, but I can think of a guitar riff which would go great with this song." "What about the vocals?" asked Elvin. "I can't sing well, and Wayne can hardly hear, so we can't do 'em." "How about you, Nobby?" Steve asked. Charles told them about his vocal cord problem, so didn't have the voice for classical music or opera. "Well, I'll try," he said, and put the sheet music with lyrics next to the music on the rack of his piano. He then played and sang Vulnerable. Charles finished to a stunned silence. The three looked at him agog. "That sounded different," said Steve. "You sound great, Nobby," Elvin exclaimed. "You may not have a voice for opera, but it was perfect for this ballad. Your gravelly tenor twang made you sound like a cross between Andrea Bocelli and Joe Cocker." "Outstanding, buddy," said Wayne. "Right, let's get our stuff and see what we can do," said Steve, smirking at the other residents, who made a hasty retreat as Wayne, Elvin and Steve went to get their instruments. They set up next to Charles, plugged in their instruments, and went to stand around the piano. "Play that song again, Nobby," said Steve. Charles played and sang Vulnerable again. Once they'd finished, Charles and Wayne discussed how to incorporate electric guitar, double bass, and what drum beat, and Charles jotted down chords and the beat. They spent the day rehearsing, adjusting and tweaking the song, and carried on after supper well into the evening. Steve, Elvin and Wayne felt a renewed vigour for music thanks to Charles, who tutored and directed them. Vulnerable took shape over the next few days as the four came together, and by the end of the fourth day they performed a decent rendition of Vulnerable. "That sounded fantastic, lads," said Steve as they finished playing. "I agree. You've all done excellent," said Charles, and continued. "It's a lovely song. Well done, Wayne." Wayne smiled. "Shall we go to the boozer and celebrate? It's only 8 o'clock, said Elvin, smiling. "Great idea, Chippers," said Steve. "I agree," said Wayne. "Great idea, buddy." "I'll get my hat," said Charles. Elvin, Steve and Wayne packed away their instruments, and Charles went to fetch his light summer trilby from his room before heading to the pavilion. Dressed in short-sleeve shirts and slacks, the four sat on their regular bench outside and chatted. "I think we have a band," Elvin announced and chuckled. "We have," said Charles. "So, what are we going to call ourselves?" They pondered for a moment, and Steve announced, "The Four Old Fogies from Cleethorpes," he laughed. "The Fosdyke Old Fogies." "That's a bit of a mouthful," said Elvin. They laughed, and Charles suggested, "We are ancient old fossils, so how about the Fosdyke Fossils?" Considering Charles's suggestion, Elvin said, "Or just the fossils." They thought about the name. Although with the added, it sounded like a throwback to the 60s, said Charles, so suggested, "Fossils?" Steve grinned and said, "I like it." The three nodded their agreement, and Steve raised his glass. "To fossils," he announced. The four chinked glasses and repeated aloud, "Fossils."